Thank you for joining us today to discuss how employers can help preserve and protect reproductive health care for women across Central Ohio. My name is Shannon Ginther, and I'm the chair of the Columbus Women's Commission. First, some general housekeeping items about today's webinar. We will moderate the chat and do our very best to answer questions at the latter part of today's webinar. A recording will be sent out following the event so you can review any of the information we go over today. We hope you will find today's conversation useful and that you walk away with actions you can take no matter the size of your organization. As we navigate the post-Roe landscape, it is important to know that employers can and should play a key role in protecting access to reproductive health care. However, a handbook for this new era doesn't exist yet. We're all drafting our own as we go along, and we look forward to doing so together. During today's webinar, we have brought together subject matter experts and local employers to discuss practical steps that employers of any size can take to support the health and well-being of your employees. I am pleased to introduce them. First, we're joined by Iris Harvey, President and CEO of Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio. In her role, Iris provides visionary and collaborative leadership for the organization's healthcare delivery and financial operations of 17 health centers throughout Ohio. As CEO, Iris also oversees government relations, public policy, and patient and supporter advocacy. Iris is a Fulbright Scholar, a Ford Foundation Scholar, and Consortium Fellow. She holds an MBA and BS degrees from the University of Southern California, as well as an EDS degree from the George Washington University. She will be moderating our panel today. Our first panelist is Flory Wilson. Flory is the founder and CEO of Gender Ideal, a nonprofit that uses data to shift the norms of workplace gender equity and inclusion standards. Gender Ideal has worked with nearly 100 businesses to measure, benchmark, and advance gender equity practices. Flory has also authored the Repro Playbook, a tactical guide for how companies can protect reproductive health access for their workers with a focus on worker and race equity in the post-Roe environment. Next, we will hear from Pam Carita. Pam is an experienced employment lawyer and human resources professional representing management in everything relevant to the employment relationship. She practices with the Taft firm here in Columbus. She's also Taft's Chief Human Resource Officer. Our final panelist is Erin Upchurch. Erin serves as the Executive Director of the Kaleidoscope Youth Center here in Columbus. Again, thank you all for being with us today, and I'd now like to turn it over to Iris.
Good evening, good afternoon. I just will drill down just slightly on post-Dobbs. So the Supreme Court's decision on Dobbs put Ohio's 6-week abortion ban into effect. The 6-week ban prohibits any abortion where there is a fetal detection of cardiac activity. And since most people don't know that they are pregnant until after 6 weeks, it essentially is a total ban on abortion. Our data indicates that over 2.5 million people of reproductive age who can get pregnant in Ohio will lose access to abortion care. So in anticipation that the Dobbs decision would abandon 50 years of precedence, Planned Parenthood, along with our other providers and supporters, we were pleased to spring into action to assist those in need. We had already established a navigator position and have increased our call center capability where those needed abortion could seek care and assistance. The day that the Dobbs decision was announced, we called hundreds of patients who already had an appointment for an abortion and proceeded to help them understand the circumstances and to provide them with the care and the assistance that they needed. Our patient navigators assist patients by accessing any and working with them on any socially, emotional, financial, logistical, and practical barriers to accessing abortion care outside of the state. This support includes financial assistance for food, transportation, lodging, and childcare to patients in need. In addition to this support is extensive planning and journey mapping to connect Ohioans to a safe abortion provider, potentially hundreds of miles away. So patients receiving care through navigators receive a passport that contains vital records to ensure a seamless transition to care as they overcome their unimaginable obstacles. And we are so thankful and appreciative of the assistance that the city of Columbus has given us. Columbus is, with the $500,000 grant, Columbus is signaling that they trust the choice of the people and that the people have the right to make a choice and to bring down barriers and to reject inequalities and to welcome them back to the state, any person who has needed to travel outside of the state to get the care that they need. As healthcare providers, we've been aggressive in seeking legal remedies from the Ohio courts. We filed a brief initially to the Ohio Supreme Court, which took no action. Thereafter, Planned Parenthood, along with other providers and the ACLU, immediately filed for a temporary restraining order in the Ohio courts, and that was issued on September 14th. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, we follow the temporary restraining order by filing a case with the Hamilton County Court of Common Pleas and ask for a preliminary injunction against Senate Bill 23. So on Ohio 7th, the Hamilton County Court of Common Pleas announced that it will grant abortion providers and advocates' requests for a preliminary injunction against Senate Bill 23, the law banning abortion at approximately 6 weeks of pregnancy. As a result of the ruling, abortion up to 22 weeks of pregnancy remains legal at this time while litigation continues. So the preliminary injunction is being challenged by the state of Ohio. We can only guess what the outcome will be. We are not overly hopeful. We've seen the tenure of the courts change with the previous president. And we also just recently saw that Georgia courts upheld their state's 6-week ban. So in Ohio, abortion is already a right, only in name for far too many people. Over the last 10 years, we've seen more than 30 restrictions on abortion. And so many people already struggle to access it. These restrictions fall hardest on Black, Latino, and Indigenous people, and people with low incomes, and people living in rural areas. So I hope for all of our participants today that gives you a bit of a background, because we have some wonderful people who are going to tell you some of the things that are so important to do. And I am going to start with, okay. We have our first participant, who is Flory Wilson, Miss Wilson. And she's going to give us the business case for protecting reproductive health. And Flory, how are you? It's nice to meet you today. And I'd like to ask you, why is reproductive health a business issue?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you to the Columbus Women's Commission for this opportunity for us to gather and talk about this incredibly important topic. And Iris, thank you so much. Just in the comments you just made, I mean, you really underscore how fragile, right, access to abortion is today for millions of women across the country, because of course the legal, shifting landscape that you've just described in Ohio is happening, in now dozens of states across the United States, and restricting access to reproductive health services for so many women. So thank you for everything that you do and for framing this issue so clearly for us. So I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about this business case for businesses. What is the role of business on this issue, and why should businesses recognize that this matters and is relevant to them and to their workers? And so there are kind of 4 points that I want to make that kind of collectively, I think, build this case or this narrative for why this is a particularly sensitive issue for business. The first is, women are an essential part of America's workforce today. So when Roe passed in 1973, 43% of women worked outside of the home. Today, that figure is 57.4%. So over the last near 50 years, 17% more women have been able to seek, gainful employment outside of the workplace. That's a significant number. And so today, that means we represent 47% of all workers in America. And 86% of those women, when surveyed, said that controlling if and when to have children has been an important component to their ability to have a successful career. So again, we need to recognize that women are an important driver of the engine of America's economy. The second point I want to make is that reproductive health is a critical component of healthcare broadly, and that abortion is also common. And I think this is something that we've been really resistant to talk about. So I just want to put some stats out there, because I think when we hear these numbers, we start to go, oh, okay, this is actually common. So in a typical year, and again, looking at data kind of over the last 10 years in the United States, there are about 6 million pregnancies in the United States. Half of those pregnancies are unplanned pregnancies. There are about 3.6 million births in the United States each year. And so what we can distill from these numbers is that about 35% of pregnancies that occur in a year do not actually result in a birth. Why is that? Well, a significant number of pregnancies end in miscarriage. In fact, probably all of these numbers are an underestimate, because many women have miscarriages before they even know they're pregnant, right? Because we know you often don't know you're pregnant until you are, technically 6, 8, maybe even 10 weeks or more pregnant. So on average in the United States, there are about 1 million abortions in the United States in a year, and there are about 1.1 million reported miscarriages. These are really big numbers. These are not small, exceptional figures. And what we know from that is that 1 in 4 American women of childbearing age have had an abortion. There's another dimension of that we don't talk about often. But if 1 in 4 women in America have had an abortion, that means that 1 in 4 men in America have been impacted by and likely have benefited from an abortion. And when I talk about that benefit, I want to highlight a fact. And sorry, I should say, all of these stats that I'm telling you, I'm not giving you the citations because it would take too long, but we will put a link in the chat to a page on my Protect Reproductive Health website that gives all of the sources of this. So these are not Florrie Wilson's imaginary figures, but these have actually been provided by third party. But young men whose partners were able to access abortion when tracked over time were 15% more likely to graduate from college and had demonstrably higher income earnings. And these were tracked, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years after a partner needed an abortion. So there's real economic benefit for men in their partners being able to access a full range of reproductive health services, okay? And abortion is common. And why do we not think of it as something common? Because those 1 in 4 women who have had an abortion probably don't want to talk about it, because no one was ever happy to get an abortion. They were relieved to get an abortion, but something went wrong, and often there's a lot of trauma around having obtained that service. And so just because we don't talk about it, we should not assume that means it's not happening. Now, this is very much a workplace issue. Limiting access to reproductive health services has a significant impact on the economy and individuals and businesses. 50% of Americans receive their health care insurance through an employer, either as a direct employee or because they are the dependent of someone who's getting health insurance through their employer. So this makes this issue become a critical business issue, right? In our country, for better or for worse, we get our insurance through our employers, and so employers really need to be thinking critically about what is the full range of health benefits my workforce and their dependents need. Women who are not able to access abortion when they are pregnant are 3 times more likely to have left the workforce 6 months later, 3 times more likely than women who did have access to abortion services. Women are also more likely to live in poverty if they tried to access abortion and were not able to. And again, this is from the Turnaway study, and so this is tracking those economic impacts over a multi-year study. And then the last thing I want to highlight is that state-level abortion restrictions cost state economies $105 billion per year by reducing workforce participation, earnings, and increasing turnover and time off for workers, which again, has an impact on the financial performance of businesses. So there's that business case. Then the last point I want to make is that workers are increasingly vocal about the fact that this issue matters to them and that they are frustrated that their employers are not being more explicit and proactive on the issue. So we know that 86% of Americans believe that women should have bodily autonomy and abortion access should be part of their reproductive health services. A majority of workers recently said they would not accept a job in a state that has recently banned abortion. And those figures are even higher when you look at younger workers. So when we look at millennials and Gen Zers, who happen to be the most fertile of our population, they feel even strongly that they do not want to live in a place where they would have restrictions on their reproductive health access, and they don't want to work for companies that are not ensuring that they have reproductive health protections. The last stats I want to highlight just came out recently from Resume Builder. They were looking at patterns of job seekers on their platform, and they have noted that since the Dobbs ruling came out in late June, 32% of job seekers, and that includes men and women, are not applying for jobs in states that have reproductive health restrictions, and they're explicit in that as they're looking for jobs. And since the ruling, 27% of job seekers that are based currently in states where they are putting restrictions on reproductive health access are only applying for jobs in states that have codified protections for reproductive health access. And so for all of you on this call in Ohio, this is a workforce, this is a talent issue, and this is a retention issue. I'm going to pause there. I know we have a number of other speakers, but I guess just the last thing I want to say is that given this business case, given the focus that my organization, Gender Ideal, has on gender equity in the workplace, we spent the time from when the leak came out in May until the ruling dropped in June, speaking with heads of HR, benefits administrators, benefits attorneys, third-party benefits platforms, to try to piece together what the combination of benefits are that an employer can put into place to ensure that they are protecting reproductive health access for all of their workers. And I want to note that a number of large brands, Amazon is one of them, put these headlines out right after the Dobbs ruling came out saying, we'll reimburse for travel up to $4,000, don't worry. Well, guess what? Devil is in the details. Many of those companies, their benefits are only accessible for those employees who have opted into health insurance through that employer. And so in the case of Amazon, it doesn't cover any of their part-time workers. It doesn't cover any of their gig or piecemeal workers. Those same workers who, as Iris noted, are the lowest income. They are probably the most racially diverse and those most vulnerable populations who need access to these services, and they are not being covered by their employer. In our Pro-Repro playbook, we have outlined the additional steps that employers can take to make sure that even if you're not on the health benefits plan, your privacy can be protected. You can have legal protection by accessing through other third-party benefits platforms like emergency funds, the cash that you need to get the access to these critical health services. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Iris, I'll turn it back to you, and I'm looking forward to a good Q&A in a couple of minutes.
Great. Thank you, Floria. You've really stimulated a lot of thinking, I think, with our audience, and we're going to continue on. So Pamela Kribda, hope I got that right. Pamela, I'd like to ask you if you would tell us, for employers that want to support impacted employees, how can they get started, number one? And as follow-up question, what should be considered when creating employee benefits? And you might want to talk to what options are available. We can take one at a time.
Sure. The first thing you can do, and I just want to note at the outset that this is a very hotly contested topic. Of course, you know that better than I do, but among employees. And one thing that you may have to consider, employee resource groups where people, like-minded people, can get together and talk and get some thoughts off their chests too, are wonderful ideas.
Mm-hmm.
You may have to have a policy that says, we tolerate all views, and that means you too, because it's gotten to the point on some things like abortion where everybody's afraid to bring it up because people are so intolerant of another person's point of view. So you might have to start at the point of saying, we tolerate all views, even yours, and that means you tolerate everybody's views while you're here with us. So forums for conversation, things like that, easy fixes. You can do that, and you can tell your employees who are anti-abortion, you can have a group too. You know, you folks can sit in a room and talk about anti-abortion if you want. But real benefits, by which I mean things that are bottom line help you get an abortion, there's a couple of problems to them. A lot of us pay for abortion now, and we also pay for abortion-related travel. A note about abortion-related travel. The EEOC is going after companies who are only providing travel for abortions and not for other serious health conditions because they say it is discriminatory. Nobody asked me to put my opinion in, and I won't, just to say I think they could have bigger fish to fry, but you didn't hear that here. However, that's the point of view that they're taking on it. So be aware that you may need a policy that pays for health-related travel altogether. The Family and Medical Leave Act still operates on this, and we want to be sure all of our HR departments understand that. We believe, again, very few cases on this, so we're kind of out on a limb, but we believe that FMLA, pregnancy and pregnancy termination procedures, are probably serious health conditions covered by FMLA. Only a couple of courts have considered whether abortion and termination of pregnancy is a serious health condition, but with very little analysis, they came to the conclusion that it was a serious health condition. Employees are also entitled to FMLA for a period of incapacity due to pregnancy. That's right in the regs. So biological thinking, the time spent terminating that pregnancy is related to the pregnancy. So if an employee is unable to perform her work for a period of time after an abortion, she may be eligible for FMLA leave. And a family member, like her partner, might be eligible for FMLA leave to help care for her at that time. Other benefits, whether you're covered or not, paying for travel by FMLA, there are a few other problems with benefits. And I also have to throw this in. While we're talking about all these other benefits that we can come up with, and most employers are very willing to do, none of them have any idea of the statistics that Flory was just talking about. I'm gobsmacked by them, and I actually did a little research before I did this into what the statistics were. And the problem, the economic impact, is a lot greater than I knew. Watch for the Ohio, and I know that Iris is going to be able to tell us the nanosecond it happens. Watch for that heartbeat bill, because if that happens, there's an aiding and abetting section to that heartbeat bill. Therefore, if we're paying for abortion travel and adding extra benefits for abortion, and even giving, maybe, we don't know what this means, even providing resources for our employees about out-of-state places, it could be scrutiny and liability for the company, its executives, and even its board of directors. So when boards of directors can be on the line, I think you're going to see backing away from some of this very positive energy that we've had. One thing about funding benefits, self-funded plans are not subject to state insurance laws. So you don't have to amend your ERISA plan. You can just tell your insurer we're going to cover it. The benefit has to comply with state laws, though. So if that heartbeat bill becomes the law, then we have to worry about the aiding and abetting prong. Changing your plan to allow travel and to pay for abortion could be aiding and abetting. Something else that I think is underutilized by employers and super helpful is explore your employee assistance plan offerings. I think many of you are going to find that your employee assistance plan may be a little weak-kneed. So this is a double need. It's probably a multifaceted need, but not only can abortions, in some cases, early abortions be handled by a telehealth visit and a prescription, the offerings that we have for mental health and wellness under many EAPs are very thin. And we just, our own firm, a whole new, very robust mental health and wellness plan that provides weeks and weeks of therapy for people, including up to 18 months after an employee leaves us for any reason. So really look at your EAPs, encourage employers to do that. It is not inexpensive, but it is not as expensive as a lot of other things. Again, though, remember, if aiding and abetting comes back in, telehealth is going to be off the table. And Iris, I know there was also something else about, there was another bill about not providing telehealth and medication over telehealth for abortion, which I also think is currently pending.
Yes. Great.
You can look at your health savings accounts and your full spending accounts. Reasonable travel expenses incurred for necessary medical treatment may be reimbursed tax-free under those. You have to look at what your plan provides. And it's unclear how the necessary medical treatment definition would clear out under that. But that might be a way. And I think providing information, I was shocked when I started researching for this. There's a website out there that you plug in your zip code and then you plug in your last menstrual period, the date of your LMP. I had to look up what that meant. I guess I've gotten too old to remember this thing, so I had to look that up. But you plug that in and then it pops up a list of like 50 or 60 places within the state, because now we're on 22 weeks, where you can go to get an abortion. It also pops up other suggestions. So I put in a kind of recent LMP, and it was telling me about telehealth medicine options. And I think if an employer wants to be truly helpful through one of those resource groups, they can provide a lot of information for employees, where there are great websites, vetted websites, and help people just get information and know what to do. And despite racking my brain, I'm very worried about the aiding and abetting piece of this. I could think of a million things we could do if it weren't for the aiding and abetting. I can even think of ways around the EEOC's discrimination charges just by making, a wider array of benefits for everybody. But with this hanging over our heads, this is pretty much, I think, the whole buffet of what we're going to be able to do for now. I'll tell you one thing, though, that doing this does. It tells your employee, we don't less you. We don't think you're wrong. We don't think you're bad. We think it is a medical issue and should be treated like a medical issue. And I know how much that means to employees who are struggling with some of these decisions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, Ms. Upchurch, we'd like to hear from you. I'd like you to talk about, let me see here. Can you give us, how is KYC taking steps to ensure that employees can access the care they need? How are you supporting their reproductive health needs, benefits, and communication practice? I think our audience would love to hear that.
Sure. Thank you for that. And hello, everyone. I think our approach to this is a little different. I'm really happy to be here, as often LGBTQI plus identities aren't always included in these conversations. And so, I think, especially if I were to be offering guidance to other businesses or organizations, it's even making small changes like person and individual
Mm.
instead of the binary, because it is more inclusive and people need to be able to see themselves in our policies and procedures and practices. Um, Reproductive health care is extremely wide and it is healthcare and it also is an intersectional. And so we approach the work that we do from that perspective. Our policies and procedures at Kaleidoscope, or our vision, I guess you should say, is to really function in a space of what I call liberatory or to be liberation. And so everything we do is in service of that, is removing the most barriers possible. Um, and then also to protect the privacy of our team. And so one of the main ways that we're able to expand that service of liberation is we have flexible and unlimited PTO.
Mm.
And so what that means is our employees are not accruing PTO. They don't have a set limit. They don't have to choose between sick time and family time and all of these different things. And then we also provide an additional 3 weeks of paid time off. So we have like a summer recess, and then we have an end of the year, a winter break the last 2 weeks of December. And so because that's embedded in the culture of our organization, it allows people to have that freedom if they need to take time off for healthcare procedures or whatever it is, maintaining their privacy and then following, the practice of getting things covered and whatnot so they can be out of time and not have to worry about that. So that's one way that's one we've already have had in practice since 2018. We also work really hard to pay what I consider liberatory wages. So it goes just beyond or further than a living wage, which we know that is a big piece because even if folks can have time off, they can't necessarily always afford the time off, right? Or, with our PTO, that is across the board. So we don't have any part-time employees right now, but even we have part-time, everyone has access to that. And so we don't differentiate between full-time, part-time and whatnot. So that's also part of it. We make sure that our wages are in a way that folks can afford things like co-pays to go to the doctor, or if they are taking time off or have to travel or do anything of that nature, they can be a little more supported in that way. And we have opportunities through some of our funding to not necessarily have what's the word, I'm like a fund to pay for these things, but we do have some of our funding which centers specific identities that we're allowed to offer scholarships or support as needed. And so we have the benefit, there's 20 of us there, we're a little bit smaller, so we do have the benefit of building and adjusting and creating policies that are really responsive. Pam, I think maybe it was, well, anyway, one of you mentioned Generation Z and millennials, and we have a lot of those that we are hiring, and our workforce tends to be skewing younger and younger. And it's interesting. I always say, like, Generation Z, I find them terrifying in the most beautiful way. I have an 18 and 20-year-old in my home, so they're terrifying, and like they got this stuff right. I'm so excited to see the world when they are actually in charge of it. I think it's going to rock all of our worlds, and but their approach to everything is just so it makes sense. Like they don't have to do trainings about intersectionality; they live it. And so that also helps inform the work that we're doing and the conversations we have and how they talk about things with their friends and helping us to inform. And so part of our vision is to work in partnership with young people. And so having them on our team as employees, not just folks that we serve, has been really helpful to inform the work that we're doing and what's happening out there. Around family planning. We are also in the process of looking at our healthcare benefits for next year it's a challenge, as I'm sure many know, depending on the size of your organization, to find the most inclusive healthcare. 5 years ago, we were having a hard time finding healthcare coverage that was inclusive of trans, gender, non-binary folks. And so we have that, but it still doesn't cover everything we need to. And so we're looking at different ways to make sure we're providing those types of benefits, and determining what's going to be best for our team so that they can have that liberatory experience and making choices. And I always think of the quote from Bell Hooks where she says that oppression is a lack of choices. And really, this is what all of this is about at its very core, is people being able to have a choice for who they are, how they live their lives, how they identify, how they navigate the world. And so that's the focus on how we're doing what we're doing. And I can pause there. It seems so simple, right? Eliminate
If
PTO
it
and
were.
pay them high.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is great. I think we want to open it up to some questions. Shannon, did you want to make any comments before we do?
Can I, would you need me to add one more thing?
Yeah, please do.
I was just remembering Christine and I talked about this, but and Pam, you alluded to this, is like having those conversations and creating a workplace to where those conversations can happen. And it's not about what people believe in as right or wrong. It's the facts. Like, when Dobbs happened, we talked about it at our next staff meeting. There was space to say, what do y'all feel like we need to do something as an organization? How is this impacting you? So having a workplace to where those conversations can happen, not from a place of values, but as a place of operations and practicality. But also my board, we were able to have those conversations, and they were like, we should give everybody money to travel in a hotel. And I was like, easy there. Which is a beautiful thing to have to pull your board back sometimes, right? Because in nonprofits, we know that often it's opposite. So having a culture that isn't just this is what we do, but that is actually the culture and the conversations has made navigating this so much easier. So if anything does come up, I know that we can respond and adjust to it in the way that we need to without a bunch of red tape and hoops to jump through.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we appreciate your putting comments in the chat. If you have any questions, please indeed put them in the chat and address them to anyone that you want, and we'll all jump in to answer them. I'm checking the chats now as we talk. Let's see. I don't see any questions yet. One of the things, I'm thinking, even in our own organization, one of the things we started discovering is that often when we brought new employees on, they were the first to raise it non-binary. The insurance benefits sign up didn't give them the option of choosing something that was appropriate with. So that was an ongoing battle, right, with our insurance companies. Same thing with our electronic health records. We actually just moved to another system, to Epic, which is like the major system in the country. And we built in sort of a gender neutral option for people. And what we find is that, we're not using dead names for a patient when they come in. We're being able to call them what they want to be called and to treat them in the way that they feel valued. And often we have to look at many of our policies and literature and make sure that those things are being covered. And that's very important. I also think that, when we think about abortion, one of the other things that's really important to take into consideration is, I think Flory mentioned how much how unintended or unplanned pregnancies they are. And if you think of how much expense your benefits programs, I think pregnancy is probably one of the highest expense. And so the person who did not want to go through that, if they're given an opportunity to have choice, that makes a real big difference. And we know that, the average family in America wants to have maybe 2 kids, right? And so if you think about that, that means that pregnant person spends about 5 years of their life either trying to get pregnant, being pregnant, or postpartum, right? But that also means that they spend over 70% of their time trying not to get pregnant, which is where all of this, reproductive health care really comes into being, and why it's so important to have the options. And the younger people, indeed, they they demand it. And if you don't deliver, they are not too eager to join you. So let's see. Okay. We've not received any questions yet. So this is a chance for, I know we sort of cut everybody off to keep it in a short time, but I'd like to go back around and, start with Flory and see if there's you've put a lot of links in. Is there anything else that you wanted to add? And we'll go to each person.
Yeah, I would, just to get like really brass tacks for a moment, if there are folks on this call who are like, okay, but I hear all this and like specifically what should my company be doing? In the ProRepro playbook, there are 7 actions that we encourage companies to do. Hopefully some of these are already benefits that are in place, but I'll just rattle through them. The first is paid sick leave. You can't travel out of state to get abortion services if you don't have time off from work. And, paid sick leave is important as a pro-family policy if you yourself are sick or you're a caregiver and your kids or other dependents are sick. Sick leave also is really important for women broadly when we think about menopause needs, and that's a topic that I think is only beginning to kind of be explored and considered from an employer perspective as more women who are in the mid-career and midlife are in the workplace and dealing with these issues. So having a paid sick leave policy that articulates how it should be used and affirms that your manager can never ask you, why are you asking for the sick day? Not their information, right? So protecting privacy of employee, but ensuring they understand the benefits they have access to. And I want to underscore, there's been some really good surveying done that shows it is a net benefit to employers to provide paid sick leave. It is not a net cost. Mm-hmm. The reason is, when you have a sick employee who can stay home instead of coming into the office with the cold or the COVID or whatever, guess what? Everyone else at the office gets sick and then everyone has to take a sick day. If people can take a sick day, you actually have fewer people who are out sick, less interruption, and employees who are more loyal. So paid sick leave, number 1. Number 2, paid, ideally, family leave. Paid family leave is this idea, it is gender neutral, it is generational neutral, but if you are growing your family, whether it's through adoption, through birth, through surrogacy, whether you are a heterosexual couple or homosexual couple, you have access to the leave to be caregivers. So paid family leave, ideally 12 weeks or more. If that feels cost prohibitive for an employee or an employer, then start with maternity leave, right? That's the more traditional version of it, but that's a great starting place. So how do you actually support those employees as they grow their families? Number 3 is, the travel reimbursement through health insurance. Pam talked about some of these details. I would just say, though, if you're in Ohio and you're in a fully insured plan, which means that you can't dictate what benefits are in your plan, and Ohio is probably going to be restricting in many of their plans, then employers can add what is called an HRA, a health reimbursement account on top, and say, no worries, we will cover these services and we will cover travel reimbursement. That's a supplement. But so if your health plan seems restrictive, there are ways to get around that. The next one I think is the most critical when we think about this through an equity lens. Think about the employee who does not have more than $400 in their checking account, who does not have credit cards. And by the way, this is a huge portion of the American population. What is that person going to do? They might not be able to travel to get this abortion, right? And then they're going to leave your workforce 6 months later because now they have to stay home to care for their child. Or you can put in an emergency fund program. This was a concept actually that really expanded during COVID. Employers started putting emergency funds in place for COVID expenditures. It could be anything from I have to buy a monitor for my home office, or it could be I need to pay double to have a caregiver in my house for my children while I'm trying to work, whatever it was. But these emergency funds they're set up in advance through the employer with all of the employees listed. And they can be general health and wellness funds. Maybe someone uses it to go to the gym and get their gym membership reimbursed, or maybe it's a medical specific fund. So again, you can define it as broadly or narrowly as your company is comfortable with. But basically, when that employee goes in and says, I need money for medical purposes, you do not have to provide receipts. You do not have to provide additional information. The line of inquiry stops there. And these funds are set up in a way where the money is dispersed directly into that employee's account within 24 hours. So that, in my mind, that is the bridge between great health benefits for our employees that are on the health benefits plan, but this is how you get to those employees who may need the support and who are not on the health benefits plan. Last one is relocation benefits. If employees want to leave and if they are able to do a job from a different state, have a relocation policy that encourages them to do so if that's their interest. So,
Great.
Thanks for that opportunity.
We have a question in the audience from Andrea Williams, and she says, I'm coming from a public higher education institution, which is more closely governed by state funding policies than private companies are. What are additional ways to address employees' needs within these institutions?
I think my first question is,
you may be more familiar. Sorry.
I guess my first question is, well, hold on, she's adding more because I was about to ask her some clarification.
I'm sure that someone will say that people who cannot become pregnant and thus won't need abortion are not getting the benefits of travel. Yeah.
So I guess my first thing I was going to say is, like, I think it's important to determine the needs of employees. Sometimes we make a lot of assumptions, but to ask and figure those out. And I'm a social worker, and I believe in being strategic and subversive and figuring out the way to following the rules and figuring out a way to still make it happen. So that's what I would say. And I also teach at OSU, and so the higher education things are not lost on me. But then also looking here at your second point, I think that's where it gets important to use language like person and individual, families. Like the less gendered language is, the better it is. It also helps support privacy, but it also helps support people not being discriminated against. I'm curious about the men getting something for financial advantage, kind of what that means. I don't know if it's maybe an insinuation that folks will make up a need for something, but this is that trust-based thing that you do as an employer. To Florrie's point, talking about the paid leave, with our unlimited PTO, that covers all time off. And have I gotten burned? Have we gotten burned? Absolutely. But it's one person out of 20 or two people out of 30 or whatever it is. And I much rather engage in the conversation and the coaching and the repair than take it away from everybody else. And so there's always going to be the what if somebody takes advantage of this or whatever. And, like, you know what? Clearly they needed it for something. And if they can get their needs met in that way, it's unfortunate. And it's going to be okay, because I believe in the bigger picture and making sure that we're serving the greater population.
Right. Great response. I don't see any more other questions. Is there anyone else who would like to add something to our conversation? One of the things that I think it's really important for us to keep in mind is that, your staff are aware of the issues, and they are expecting the type of treatment from you that holds up to the values of your organization. And if you're unwilling to do that, then your employee satisfaction goes down and the interest in longevity with your organization. So I would agree. I think everyone said this. Florrie said it quite eloquently. This is a competitive advantage, right? People are not interested in working in a workplace where they're not going to get the type of equitable treatment that they need. Let's see, I see another question here, or Flory has said that most health insurance policy cover travel reimbursement for many types of healthcare needs. Right, knee replacement, I remember getting that. And it's often more efficient to go to a health center that only provides that service and thus requires the employee to travel. So if those kinds of services also offer travel reimbursement, you should have health parity requirements. So treating everyone equal at the same time. Great. Let's see, I have another one. Helpful, thanks. I don't know if we totally answered the higher education question, but I do remember at a time when I was in higher education, many of our faculty started noticing that parent leave for same-sex marriages, especially when there was a child in the house that was from a previous relationship, they weren't getting that same benefit. And what we actually started seeing is that the unionized faculty started asking for the benefits. So you don't often have to be the person who initiates it. What you have to be is listening to the people that you're employing and that you're serving, and your customers as well, right? They also will give you some information about what they want. I would like, Shannon, do you want to tell people about the wonderful gift that the city of Columbus did? Because I think this is so helpful to patients, and we're encouraging more cities to do this. And it was great that the city of Columbus was very prompt and self-initiative in doing this.
Sure, absolutely. So the city provided a $1 million access fund for Planned Parenthood of Greater Ohio, Ohio Women's Alliance, and the Abortion Fund of Ohio to mitigate financial barriers to abortion access and improve reproductive health care education citywide. Examples of financial barriers include things we've talked about today: transportation costs, lost wages, and childcare expenses. While we're on that, that was one of a couple things that the city of Columbus is looking at. The city has deprioritized enforcement of regulations related to abortion. So we're just a little more interested in having the Columbus Police Force solve actual crimes and not burden our officers with arresting someone for making their personal health decisions. And then the other things we are looking at, and it was talked about a little bit on the call today, is the health insurance plan. So right now, the city's health insurance plan does cover abortions. If the employee seeks care out of state, we are looking to see what other access points there might be. To Iris's point earlier about, women often spend 75% of their life trying not to get pregnant. So just making sure that we have in place everything that we need to around reproductive health care. So not just access to abortion if and when it's needed, and though also, the full gamut of reproductive health care for women and families. So those are a couple of things we're taking a look at, obviously also with an eye on what happens in the courts to make sure that we're obviously following the rules and looking for a way to get it done. So that's a little bit more about this city and what the city's up to. And Christina Ratliff with the Women's Commission just came on camera here. Christina, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll close this out. Excuse me. I just want to thank everyone for their engagement today on this important issue. A big thank you to our panelists, our moderator, Iris. We know this conversation does not end here, and I just want to extend the offer. If you're interested, the Commission is happy to pair you with an organization that's providing comprehensive reproductive health care benefits to their employees. So up here to learn more about what they're doing. And we will be sharing the recording for today's presentation. I'll also share resources. Thank you, Flory, for all the wonderful resources you shared. So I think we will close out today, and I just want to thank everyone again.